Good evening, and welcome to the December 4th, 2017 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. If you could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On to item number 2, public participation. Since there's no one from the public in the room, we will close public participation. Probably a record for us. And on to item number 3, which is the second discussion regarding the request to conduct a national youth tobacco survey at Merrimack Middle School. And I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, middle school principal Carragher brought to your attention a request from the Centers for Disease Control about conducting a national tobacco youth survey. And at that time, the board had a couple of questions that they were hoping to get answers to. And so in your packet, you have a direct email that Mr. Carragher received from Pat McComb Podmostko answering some of his questions, plus providing a little bit more detail. So one of the questions just had to do with whether the CDC was in fact interested in surveying one individual class, or meaning a classroom or a class like the 7th grade or the 8th grade. And in fact, on the second bullet highlighted in yellow, they clarify they'll be surveying one 7th grade and one 8th grade class, and that will take place in the health class for the two classes that will be taking the survey. One in the 7th grade and one in the 8th grade. In addition, we have even more clarity now about the date of the survey, being March 20th, 2018. And then related to that, assuming approval by the board, Principal Carragher would be asked to provide just the name of the class and the teacher's name and number of students and other logistical information so that then they can prepare accordingly. And I think the other question that the board asked had something to do with if this would be an opt-in or an opt-out. When we would find out how many students would participate, whether or not they would continue to come. And the answer is yes, they will come whether they have 2 students or 25 students in both classes. They are scheduling. The final question was in the packet that we provided you previously. You had been given just an opt-out form, and what's in your packet tonight is a very same version of the form, only with the possibility for parents to answer yes, my child may take the survey, or no, my child may not take the survey. And so parents can have a choice of filling out either one of those, and then based on that, Principal Carragher would provide information to the CDC about numbers who have agreed to take part in the survey so that they can prepare accordingly. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions you have. I hope I was able to answer the questions that you raised at the last meeting.
I see Andy and I see Michael.
So this is good, a lot of good clarification. So just to be clear, the parental permission form is a yes or no, opt-in or opt-out.
Right.
By default, if they don't turn it in, that's an opt-out.
Yes.
Meaning the only way that they will participate is if the parent gives explicit approval to do that. And you talk about one 7th grade and one 8th grade class, that's one group of 7th graders and then in their health class. Are you going to hand pick which class you go after for this, or are you going to go what's the process going to be on which group of 7th graders gets the form to take home to their parents?
So there's the CDC doesn't have a preference for that, so they just left they leave the principal to decide, and it might just have to do with the scheduling in the day, or there's no particular preference that either Principal Carragher or the CDC has for who that would be.
I'm curious if we figured out how we're going to do it, how we are actually going to pick the class that gets. No, it's important to know which of the X number of 7th graders is going to be a portion that will get this home, and you're going to decide somehow.
Correct.
Which of that class is.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, question's been answered. So with that, if all questions were answered, is there a motion? Andy?
I move that we allowed the district to work with the CDC to move forward with the youth tobacco survey. I guess it's a survey. It's youth tobacco survey activity to happen at Merrimack Middle School.
Is there a second? Seconded by Michael. Do you want to speak to your motion? Are you good?
I'm good.
All set. Seeing no other comments, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. And we're already up to item number 4, and I still forgot. Student Rep Puzzo is excused from tonight's meeting because he's under the weather. We hope he feels better very soon. So we're on to item number 4, which is compiled research related to the homework protocol, and I will turn it over to Dr. Naomi Schoenfeld.
Thank you, and thank you for finding time on the agenda so quickly for this. You have in your packets a bit of information that has also been provided in electronic PDF form that I'd suggest is either posted or provided in some way. It includes links to the information. This is based on some of the conversations that we've had recently, and it was a little difficult to decide what to do and whether to present this or not, because providing research base for anything can be either micromanaging, because we have excellent people who know what they're doing, versus abdicating responsibility, as in not paying attention or giving oversight. And so after listening for the last while to some of the conversations that have happened, it seemed to me that there was some middle ground that could be gained on that by looking at a group, at some of the research that does exist regarding homework completion and grading of it. And so I put this together as just something to share with the group for your information. Now, I kind of want to stress 3 things first before we even look at that, and that is every child is different. Parents are the best for knowing their own child and they know what their child needs. This is research which looks at large groups. And so it's talking about what best practice is for districts or schools. It has nothing to do with individual decisions regarding individual children. As other people have said other weeks, talking to one's teacher and such is certainly the best way to move forward on some of those. But as far as groups go, we have an interesting story. Okay, so what I did was take the questions that have been asked and the ideas that have been expressed, tried to group them in a useful way. What's happened is a change, my understanding is, in the protocol of whether or not homework should count towards whether you grade it simply because a student did it, and whether that fact that the student actually put pen to paper should affect their GPA. So there are several questions to unpack from that. The first is homework in general helpful to students? The second is grading homework for completion helpful to students? And the last is, what is the best homework practice? And it breaks up in this particular way. If you look at the first page, I would have liked that before I started. It's my lead-in. It's perfect. So the first question that people seem to have been asking is homework in general important? Within the district, I've heard a very specific answer, and that is that the district continues to consider homework important. And that's supported by the research. On the first page here, there's a survey of all research done between 1987 and 2003 by Cooper and Patel and Robinson, which is essentially a meta-analysis that shows that doing age-appropriate homework helps students achieve in school. There's relatively little doubt about that one. But it's not quite that simple. The next question that has to be asked is, does grading homework specifically for completion help students, or is it something else about doing homework? So what I did is I looked for studies across high school, college, middle school, and elementary to see what had been found about this one. And it was rather neat because there were 2 studies that go very well together at the college level, one in trades and one academic track, which was a lot of fun to be able to dovetail because they're both important. The first one, Shepard and Law in 2015, is at the college level, students in mechanics course. and they were given the choice of either graded or non-graded, they were randomly assigned graded or non-graded study questions, and they performed the same, ultimately, in the course, those who were graded and those who were not. A similar result in the academic track for students who were in educational psych. They were given either credit for percentage of questions they tried answering, regardless of right or wrong, or the accuracy of their answers, and those who were graded on accuracy as opposed to simply engaging in it did far better in their course. So that's the college outcome that one's looking for, is for students to engage in the material as opposed to simply completing it in some way, shape, or form. At the high school level, there were 3 that stood out. 1, 2, 3. And what they look at is whether or not grading homework for completion even increases the amount of homework that gets done. That's an assumption we have, that if we grade it, we say that if we take that away, students simply won't do their homework, that you have to do that for that purpose. But these studies found very much the opposite. They found that grading for completion alone did not have a positive association with students overall doing their homework. Not at the high school level, and we'll look at middle school in a moment. The next one, which was Zhang Zhu in 2005. This is a study of 920 students, and it used factor analysis, which means it tried to look at lots of different ways or reasons that homework might be helpful, and simply completing it was not related to student achievement at all. 2007, Troutwine, looking again at the high school level, and what they looked at was the idea that people think that time on homework, shown by completing it, is what makes the difference, and they say no. Students who do homework do better, but not if you simply correlate the completion. So there's very little question that homework does something, but what that something is what's up for grabs. And what this research suggests is that it's not the completion piece, it's something else that becomes important. Same thing at the middle school level. 3 studies here. I won't go through the detail of every one of them, but one is a Danish sample of about 1,400 students. One's in Germany, about 2,000 students. And then the last one is in the U.S. And what they look at is whether or not completion of homework is related to one of them, math achievement, one overall achievement, and they find no, it's not. At the elementary school level, on the next page, this is a much older study. This is from 1983. It's Epstein. There's not much recent research on elementary because it was settled. People haven't been bothering to look at it much again recently, and shows that homework completion, even at the elementary school level, didn't affect achievement. Engaging in homework did. Completion didn't necessarily. So that's the second question. So we've had 2 questions here from my perspective. First, is homework supportive? Yes. But is the thing about homework that's supportive the act of handing in a completed paper? Not so much. The last question of this sequence is, what about student self-management? Because what I've heard when we're talking within the district is that the purpose is to move students from pushing to simply hand in and get a check mark to engaging in a way that does boost achievement. And so the question then becomes, does self-managing or self-efficacy as opposed to completion boost achievement? And there were 3 studies that I've highlighted here. The first one, which is from 2011, Ramdas and Zinnerman, finds a correlation between self-regulation, otherwise known as students making their own choices as to when and how to engage in homework, from elementary through college as having a much stronger effect than time on homework as a rule. So those decisions become important. Another one with the same author but a separate co-author from 2005 shows that the self-efficacy leads to better homework, which then leads to better grades. And then the last one begins to move into the idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, if somebody's choosing to do it because they know it's a good thing versus because they'll get an M&M for doing it, in this case GPA boost. And the self-efficacy or intrinsic were the ones that were positively related to cognitive engagement and performance. So this is relatively brief, but I thought that it might be helpful to have it out there, simply to begin to say that from my perspective, this is not new, and it's not experimental. This is something that's been around in educational theory and practice for some time, in a lot of different forms. And there are many things left to talk about. At the last meeting, Miss Trethaway, am I saying her name correctly, brought something very interesting forward, the idea that she had found it useful to know what the feedback had been to her child on the homework, even without it counting towards the grade. She'd found that feedback that helped her child monitor. And those kinds of pieces are worth looking at going forward, no question. But I did want to lay to rest this idea that we're doing something strange, different, unusual, or not based within the research. And I kind of thought that this might help to put people's minds to rest a little, at least on that score, whether they agree or not, because there's certainly room for conversation. And that was more or less my reason for putting that on the agenda.
Thank you. There are some questions. I think I have Andy, Cinda, and Michael.
So I have two questions. One is, will this the PDF version of this be on the website so other people can see it, parents? Okay, that's good. Okay.
And if and again, my strength is not necessarily the technology side, but if I did it correctly, then it should be able to be clicked through to the studies themselves.
Okay.
From that, yeah.
Cool. The second question was, one of the things that I think I heard is you talk about, in your second question, you talk about that turning homework in for just completion didn't really add value. But the argument that I heard was turning homework in and have it corrected and graded based on the right and wrongness of the homework contributing to the GPA. Did you see any research that talked about schools or any level that had struggled with the graded right or wrong and how it attributed to scoring and things like that?
From what I've seen, it's split about 50-50 in the idea that how you bring students to meaningfully engage in the homework, whether you do that by saying that you provide them with graded feedback versus feedback, the two seem to perform essentially in parallel. And so the value added by adding it to the GPA seems to be minimal to none. On the other hand, the feedback itself is extraordinarily important. My guess, and this is my own guess, is that schools and districts use grading homework for correctness as a simpler mechanism to make sure that teachers do the grading. But it in and of itself isn't what's giving the value. The feedback is.
All set? Cinda.
Andy covered one of my points, was just to make sure that we have this out on the website. And then secondly, I just wanted to thank you for pulling and compiling this together and sharing this research with us. I really appreciate it. I think it's really helpful.
Thank you for listening as I work my way through it.
Mike?
I'd also like to say thank you very much for taking the time to put all this information together. I found it very valuable. I'd also like to try to piggyback on some of the stuff that you said. And one thing about self-management, what I feel is that if a student, let's say a student got 4 pieces of homework in one night, but one of them was fairly easy for the individual, 2 were kind of middle of the road, and then the 4th one was very hard. Self-management now allows that student to not focus as much on the stuff that they actually know, but actually focus on the stuff that they need to know better. And it's just like my job. If I don't know how to do something well, that's what I focus on. I don't actually just keep on doing the same thing over and over. So I think that self-management is a big area that obviously we can focus on in teaching the children some of the benefits of actually this protocol, right?
You got it.
Yes, I'm trying to make sure I use the right word here. And then the other thing that I think is interesting, and this isn't just for our teachers, this is a general teacher statement across probably the country, is that I think many teachers are probably already implementing this in the past, that they may have actually been giving homework, grading the homework, but actually not counting it towards their grade and really going towards the actual understanding and comprehension of the work, which is more the focus of a teacher. So, and the last thing I want to talk about is we talk about GPA a lot. And I think with the self-management piece, what you can see, and if a study was probably done, what you'll probably see is that children that had challenges in math or science versus English and language arts, you'll see that the math and science may actually go up because they have that time to actually concentrate on it. and actually learn it better, because they know that that's the area that they need to focus on. So thank you.
Thank you. I would, of course, echo the gratitude for compiling the research. And, when you came on the board, I think that was the most exciting part for the rest of us, is knowing someone that's teaching teachers. And this is the foundation of what you do for a living, and preparing our teachers for the classroom. So having your perspective without, with the teaching environment, but not necessarily the day-to-day operation of our district, gives that perspective that I think helps us a lot. And this is a shining example of the value you bring to the board for us, above and beyond, everything that you do on the ground to help us. So thank you for this. I definitely think it reinforces all the efforts that the district is trying to make in this space. And we'll absolutely be sharing that out and letting the community take in the content. And as always, the district is available for questions. If there's ever a question on homework protocols and student and classroom management, so that dialogue should happen whenever students are having questions.
Mike just reminded me, on the front page it gives the instructions, but one of the things about peer-reviewed research is that sometimes it can be difficult to access if you're not going through an academic or university library. But our excellent Merrimack Public Library does have access to these. And so if you cannot, people using this PDF, if they cannot click through because they don't have access, you just go into the Merrimack Public Library's online access and you can do a search and find these same pieces.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So if there are no other questions, we're on to item number 5, which is the 2017 State Assessment Results and Update with Mark.
Thank you. So I've got 2 different documents coming your way. The first one is I'd like to just introduce the results from this year's assessments by providing just a little accountability and assessment history in New Hampshire over the last few years. Because I think right now we're in a period of really significant changes, and just putting results in context, I think, might help the board and folks listening. So just a brief reminder that the 2001 No Child Left Behind Act required states to begin to implement assessments in relationship to standards that they would choose to adopt. And so that process, from the time of the authorization of that bill in 2001 to the time that states determined what they would do, was a number of years, couple of years. And so by 2005, New Hampshire had elected to join Vermont and Maine, Vermont and Rhode Island, and then later the state of Maine, to form the NECAP, New England Common Assessment Project kind of consortium. And so from 2005 to 2014, that's the assessment that New Hampshire worked under, using the state assessment and the grade level expectations that were developed by teachers and the departments of ed in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island. And as you know, those tests were in language arts, reading, math, and science. There were 4 reporting levels: proficient with distinction, proficient, partially proficient, and substantially below proficient. Reading and math were assessed at grades 3, 8, and 11. Writing was assessed in grades 5, 8, and 11, and science was assessed in grades 4, 8, and 11. These tests were administered in the fall, and one of the challenges was that when an assessment is issued in the fall and then the results come as late as December or the spring, and the intent is to take those results and then do something with them instructionally, it becomes very difficult to do that in a way that provides time for teachers to modify their instruction based on those results. But that's how it was for a number of years. In 2007, the ESEA Elementary Secondary Education Act was not authorized, or its authorization ended, and then for a period of years there was no reauthorization, and then in 2015 New Hampshire and many other states became part of the College and Career Ready standards, more commonly known as the Common Core standards, and then those were assessed using the Smarter Balanced assessment. And that was introduced in New Hampshire in 2015. We were assessing students in grades 3, 8, and 11 in ELA and math. There was a significant difference in the Smarter Balance assessment in that they were comprised of performance tasks and then computer adaptive tests. So, in other words, students were required to perform a performance task based on a mathematic problem or a language arts and analytical problem, and then analysis problem, and then in the computer adaptive part, the tests were calibrated, so if a student answered a series of questions accurately, then the tests would get a little bit more rigorous, and if after a period of time a student answered incorrectly, then the test would calibrate to a less rigorous question until a student could demonstrate that he or she had mastered that level of questioning, and then it would ramp up again. That's what computer adaptive means. It's a big difference from the paper pencil test that was kneecapped for 9 years. Another change was that the assessments were administered in the spring between March and May. So they'd be assessed in the spring, we'd get results in the summer or the early fall in the first year, and then we'd be able to disseminate those results to teachers so that at the beginning of the school year, when they had time to do something with those results, they could, and it could inform their instruction for the next year. There were 4 performance levels with Smarter Balanced as well. Exceeds grade level performance, meets grade level performance, nearly meets grade level performance, or does not meet grade level performance. At the time of its introduction, the Commissioner of Education, Virginia Berry, issued a white paper that, and I'm going to just quote it here, it said, it was advice to parents, school board members, teachers, administrators. It said, the Smarter Balanced assessment scores, quote, should not be compared to previous scores. The new Smarter Balanced assessment emphasizes real-world skills, which is fundamentally different from the old kneecap test. It is important not to make any comparisons between old scores and new. So I have often talked to you in the years that I've been in Merrimack about the ability to develop some trend lines for student results, which we had been able to do for kneecap. But because the tests were really so different, once Smarter Balance was adopted and implemented, we could no longer compare what our Smarter Balance results were to the kneecap results. So then we had to stop talking about trends because we were beginning a new line, so to speak. The challenge is that now we face yet another assessment. So the Smarter Balanced assessment is now gone. And starting in spring of 2018, until some designated time in the future, we now have something called the American Institutes for Research Assessment, or AIR. And it will replace Smarter Balance in spring of 2018. It no longer includes performance tasks and will develop test questions from a new test bank. So the entire locus of the test bank for ELA and math in the computer adaptive test that was part of Smarter Balance is now completely different. Reading, writing, and math will be assessed in grades 3 and 8, and now for the first year, science will not be part of kneecap anymore, because for the previous years we had Smarter Balance assessments in reading and math and writing, but we stayed with kneecap for science. Now AIR will take over reading, writing, and math, and science. And so, obviously, we won't begin to have any trend data for a minimum of 3 years, starting with this first assessment in 2018. So when I come to you again and talk to you about performance, I'll only be able to just report, how students did. But what it means or whether it represents a trend is not going to be possible for me to share for a period of time. And so the data that you have in front of you really is the last time that you'll be reported. We'll be able to report to you on this data. So the only one that we have any comparative results for is for science, reading and math. There wasn't enough time to establish trend data, and now we're moving again. I say that the other thing that I would just point out is that in 2015, when the Smarter Balanced Assessment came on board, it included high school, grade 11. And so teachers were trained in the administration of the Smarter Balanced Assessment for grade 11 and what it meant and how it was to be done and how that would impact the delivery of instruction and curriculum. And that was only true for 1 year. And then the very next year, there was a change from Smarter Balanced to the SAT. So while it's a known commodity, we had never administered the SAT broadly to every student. It had always been a personal election to decide whether they would do it or not. And now, for the first time in 2016, it was a requirement, and it was used as accountability and assessment data for accountability. So there was that change too. I share this with you only because I think it's important for the board and the community to know or to be reminded that what I've just described is 3 significant assessment shifts in 4 years. I don't offer any judgment about that other than to say that those are significant changes for teachers and students to get accustomed to, because it's not a small thing to get used to the administration of a test that's entirely different from another one. And so we can provide professional development to our teachers, and we'll continue to do it. We provide supports to our students in the context of curriculum adjustments. For instance, in the newly adopted science curriculum, we now see that in this new AIR assessment, there are minor changes in when content needs to be delivered. Nothing substantial in terms of the quality or the content, but something that we might have earmarked because of Smarter Balance as having been, or NECAP rather, as having been appropriate for grade 6. Maybe will need to now be shifted to grade 5. Not a major change, but a change nonetheless. And so it's important to point out that during this time of really shifting, what we've tried to do with our teachers is to focus on some core principles. So, for instance, whether, just to be as basic as I can, whether or not any assessment says it's a good idea to teach topic sentences. We know that it's a good thing to teach topic sentences to students at a certain age and stage, regardless of whether they're on the assessment. So we've really had a lot of conversation in Merrimack about what is it that's, constitutes a good instructional program, good instructional and curriculum practices, and let's kind of have our own true north, so to speak, in the midst of the changes that we can't always predict and certainly can't prepare for overnight. So we've really tried to stay focused on some core principles and to stay the course, and that's what we've tried to do and will continue to do. So having said that, I'm going to present to you the last time that you'll see the science NECAP, and because it's the only assessment that we have at the moment where we have anything comprising a trend, I've provided you with a 3-year comparative. So side by side you have district and state results for 2014 and 15, district and state results for 2015 and 16, and district and state results in bold for 2016 and 17. And from my earlier comments, I pointed out that we report in NECAP at 4 levels, level 4, 3, 2, and 1. Level 4 is the highest performance level, and level 1 is the lowest. and these are always in percent. So for 2016-17, grade 4 science, 1% of students at the state and district achieved a score of level 4. 57% of students in our district in 2016-17 scored a 57% at level 3 and 48% for the state. At level 2, 33% of students in our district scored at level 2, and a higher percent scored at level 2 at the state. And level 1, the lowest score, 9% of our students in grade 4 science scored at level 1 and 12% for the state. And then you see the district and state results for the previous 2 years. And so really you see not a lot of fluctuation, staying within several percentage points one way or the other. For grade 8 science, no students, 0% of students at level 4 at grade 8, and less than 1% at 2016-17 for the state. 25% level 3 in the district, and 26% of students at the state scored level 3. This is grade 8 science again. 60% of our students scored at level 2, and 54% scored for the state scored at level 2. And then for level 1, the lowest category, 15% of students scored at level 1 in our district, and 20% of students at level 1 for the state. And then finally, grade 11, again, I'm just focusing on 2016-17 results. 1% of students scored level 4 at the state and district level. 33% of students scored at level 3 in our district, and 31 in the state. At level 2, 47% of students scored in a level 2 in our district, and 44% at the state. And level 1, 19% in our district, and 23% for the state. So and then finally, as has been the case for as many years as I've shared this with you, the area that requires the most work consistently is inquiry. Anything having to do with a student being given a problem or a problem set and having to figure out a solution or an answer, as opposed to pure recall, like I remember the periodic table of the elements and so on. Inquiry, and this is true across the state of New Hampshire and really across the country in various assessment measures that are employed, is the most high-ordered thinking problem for students, and that's where we continue to place a lot of our work. So you'll note that for the last several years in our district, we've had a concerted effort to focus on inquiry at our August Academy. We continue to train our teachers in building classrooms that focus on problem solving, student agency, where students are required to take more ownership of their own learning, develop their own problem-solving skills, present those to the teacher, work in collaboration with the teacher to own some of their learning, so they're not passive recipients of pieces of information, but are crafters of the knowledge that they're learning alongside their teachers. And so that continues to be the area that we, are challenged by and work on. And then, if you just flip, it's a two-sided page, and what I've done there is provide you just with the 2017 results for ELA literacy on one side of the page and math on the other. And remember, this is Smarter Balanced, and this is the last time to present to you Smarter Balanced information. But 61% of our students scored at level 3 or above. That's level 3 or 4 are the highest levels. That contrasts with 58% at the state level. Grade 4 for literacy, 59% scored 3 or above at the state, in the district, and 55% of students 3 and above for the state. Grade 5, 61% at level 3 or above in our district, and 63% 3 or above for the state. For grade 6, this is literacy again, grade 6, 63% scored at level 3 or above, and 57% scored at level 3 or above at grade 6 for the state. Grade 7, 64% of our students scored at level 3 or above, and 62% of students at 62% of students at the state scored at level 3 or above. At grade 8, 63% of our students scored at level 3 or above, and at grade 8, 58% of students in the state scored at level 3 or above. And grade 11, 77% of our students scored at level 3 or above, contrasted to 62% at grade 11 in the state. And then, if you were to just flip to the final page, mathematics, grade 3, 56% of our students scored at 3 or above in Merrimack, and 54% for the state. Grade 4, 57% of students at level 3 or above, and 49% at the state. Grade 5, we're on math again. Grade 5, 49% of our students scored at level 3 or above, and 46% at level 3 or above for the state. Grade 6, 53% of students scored at 3 or above in Merrimack, and 45% of students scored at 3 or above at the state. Grade 7, 52% at level 3 or above, 51% at level 3 or above at the state. Grade 8, 50% of students scored at 3 or above in math in Merrimack, and 45% of students scored at 3 or above in the state of New Hampshire. And finally, math, grade 11, 39% of students scored at level 3 or above, and 37% of students at the state scored level 3 or above. So this actually comports pretty closely. There's some growth here, but I wouldn't call it a trend yet, because I wouldn't have called the 2015 results anything other than a baseline. So really, I would have preferred to have one more year of Smarter Balanced results before I would begin to talk about whether we could draw a lot of conclusions from this. We certainly, can and do have hunches and act on those hunches, but when it comes to significant alterations in curriculum and instruction, we don't want to be just moving too quickly if we don't have a well-considered trend line to be able to determine whether this is a fluke, unique to a particular class, and so on and so forth. And having said that, I will, next be reporting our AIR results, and then that will become the baseline, and then it will take several years before we'd be able to see whether or not we can identify any trends. And I, would certainly hope that at some point in the near future we will be afforded the opportunity to have an assessment that we can work with for a while, so that we can learn about how to use it effectively for students, draw the right conclusions from it so that it can form our instruction, and begin to settle. This period of change is exhilarating and challenging, I guess I'd say. So there it is, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Cinda and Naomi.
The first question is regarding the transition from the Smarter Balanced assessment to the to the AIR assessment. Was that something that was decided by state legislature? Does the Department of Education make that decision? Where was that decision made?
Primarily at the State Department of Ed.
Okay, so it doesn't require like our legislators to do
Correct.
that. Okay, that was my first question. My second thing I wanted to state is, it looks like from what I can see in all assessments, at least for this snapshot, that Merrimack had higher percentages than the state baseline. It looks like for all of them, and in some more striking than others. But one question that I had as it relates to the over time, when we're looking at all three assessments, is there any way to make some kind of a trend as it relates to where we fall in measure direct to the overall state baseline. So even though the assessments may be different, I'm wondering if there are some trends we can see as to how we are tracking against what perhaps would be the state baseline, since we're all kind of in that transition together.
So let's just take math for an example. One thing that you'll notice in these results, and we've seen that consistently for years, is that at the high school level, so at grade 11, there is a significant dip, and that in Merrimack, and that's also paralleled at the state level. So the baseline and the trend that we've been able to really see for a number of years now is something seems to happen from, let's say, where the scores tend to be highest at the elementary grades, and then we see a downward trajectory. And that's been pretty clear from state and local results for years. So for the last number of years, as you are all well aware, we've been really focusing our efforts on math, and that has produced most recently a new math curriculum and an adoption of materials to support that math curriculum at grades K through 8, and now hopefully this summer grades 9 through 12 and Algebra 1 at the middle school as well. So that's one example where we clearly have seen a trend that parallels the state and our district. And the other one is one that I mentioned before, and that really does have to do with, I say inquiry, and I mean that in the broadest sense. Any problem, whether it's on science, a literary analysis, or a word problem in math, any question or problem that is not evidently a true false or a yes no or a concrete answer provides challenges to students. In a way, it's not surprising, as I said, because those are the hardest kinds of questions, but clearly those transcend particular content. That's any content that's assessed that has a higher ordered level of inquiry-based thought problem solving is typically something that our students have struggled with, and that has also been reflected in state results. So I hope that answers your question, but that really, those are the two things that I would point to directly that we've been for some time now pretty aware of.
And I would say going forward, that would be helpful too, to, as a taxpayer or a school board member, to be able to understand at least the trends that we can report on. Even though we will start with kind of a brand new snapshot, there's still some history and some things that we can continue to keep an eye on.
That's true. Yep.
Naomi.
Three questions, two of which may not completely fall within your purview, but I'm hoping you know. The first is relatively easy. It looks like we'll be spending less time on testing, in that it won't be every grade level, but rather specific ones. Is that correct? Does that sound right?
Sorry, keep turning that off. So students will still be assessed in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in ELA and math as they currently are. So in that sense, it's no less. It's just with a different system, and then, but it will be not spread out over 2 assessments. It'll be spread out over the AIR assessment for including science.
Performance tasks and inquiry, are those the same in this context? Because what I'm thinking about is if we've been focusing on inquiry, which is wonderful, is what you're saying that the AIR assessment will de-emphasize those?
Yes.
Always wonderful when things turn around midstream, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Last piece, the NECAP was geared to or aligned to GLE, grade level, and the Smarter Balance to college and career ready standards. What's the AIR aligned to?
Air.
Yeah, I know this is new. I can go look it up myself, but I was just wondering if you knew.
No. So, 1 of the 2 things that I would point to directly that we've been focusing our efforts on our math curriculum at grades K through 8, and now hopefully this summer grades 9 through 12 and Algebra 1 at the middle school as well. So that's one example where we clearly have seen a trend that parallels the state and our district. And the other one is one that I mentioned before, and that really does have to do with I think the hope is that it's aligned to the college career ready standards. That's the hope. And I guess we'll see.
Thank you.
Michael.
Thank you for the overview. I just want to reiterate also that based off of all the test performances, I mean, Merrimack is above average for all except for 2 out of 17, which I think is fairly impressive. I was wondering, the data that's provided to you, is it just based off of our school and statewide, or does it give you regional areas too? Like, because obviously I would say that the regional area around here in southern New Hampshire is much different than the regional area in northern New Hampshire. And it's not just that I would say that education itself, but I could understand a school like Franconia might only have 13 kids in a classroom, which is 13 to 1 versus here having 26, 25 to 1. So obviously there's different things that could correlate based off of that. Does it get that granular for the information, or does it just give you statewide?
It just gives us a statewide average.
That's why. I mean, is there a way to actually ask for that to try to get that information, or is there?
I don't. It's never been available since I've been in New Hampshire, so I don't know whether it might be available, with the new air system. So you mean sort of disaggregating for the South Central region, for instance? Or?
I mean, there could be, if you take the data and you start figuring out and understanding, if you actually took data of classroom sizes versus socioeconomic stuff, standing, stuff like that, it definitely could help quite a bit to actually understand the data better. And it could actually even show, the benefits to classroom sizes possibly, or eliminate the benefit depending on how the information is. But I find it very interesting that we do these tests and we have lots of data, but the data doesn't get disseminated to the school districts. It gets held by the state, and then the state kind of doesn't flow that through. So
yeah, it's so the superintendent, and I over the years have been at so many state meetings, and it's a very complicated process to bid for an assessment system, and I'm not privy to any of those conversations about what the proposals might be looking for or requiring. So there's just so much I don't know. I only know what happens at the terminal end when we're trying to administer and prepare for it. So you make a good point, and certainly in this particular one there wasn't a whole lot of searching for feedback, but maybe as we get into the first year and there's an opportunity to provide some feedback about what would help you, that would certainly be one that I'd pass along. And if they could do it, hopefully they would consider doing it.
What I might ask, if the administration would actually like to know more detail and actually see more information, if it's something that you would like, maybe drafting a letter and bringing it to the board to actually maybe support that, and then put it towards the state. So if that's something that the administration might want to look forward to, then we can discuss it further and put our backing behind it possibly too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I actually have kind of a question, because I know it's out of your hands. I know this has the potential to be a valuable tool, but every time it becomes a tool of potential value, the value is devalued. Going from NECAP to Smarter Balance, from Smarter Balance now to AIR. What are your expectations on what you're going to be able to get until we can get a trend line? Because again, as we're not having a trend line, it doesn't give us anything to work off of as far as real, tangible, what I would call data that's not just a one-off. So what are our hopes with the short-term data that we collect?
So I actually appreciate that, because it provides an opportunity for me to say this. Whether it was NECAP or Smarter Balance or now AIR, all those have, I don't mean to diminish their importance, but at the end of the day, they have always been nothing more than a single data point. And I've said to you in the past, when we've done particularly well in a year, I hope we haven't crowed too loud, and when we have not done as well, we haven't, dropped our heads, because it's a data point. Really, what we've done in Merrimack for a long time, and getting better and better and better, is develop a battery of assessments that really are, I want to say, if not more meaningful to us, at least as meaningful to us as any of these state assessments. I'll give you an example. At the elementary grades, for literacy, we have the Fountas-Pinnell benchmark assessment system, which is a gold standard assessment system for students in reading up through the 8th grade. That assessment informs our instruction. So much like, as I said, I think to the board recently, when you have a medical situation and you're given a prescription, you're not going to just take the prescription for 5 years. You're going to continue to have it monitored to see if it's working like it was expected to or not, and then make adjustments. And so Fountas-Pinnell is one example of an assessment system that we know and use very well. We have recently implemented the STAR assessment, STAR 360, for reading and math, which is a gold standard, nationally normed assessment that we use to triangulate results with our Fountas-Pinnell assessment system. Now that we have a new math program, it has its own built-in assessments, which will then be correlated to the STAR assessment system. And those aren't, I really wouldn't argue that that's too much assessing. It's the kind of assessing that you need to do to dipstick to know whether students are getting what you're teaching or not. And the only way to know is to periodically assess. Are you with me? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about, or do I need to review? And that's the way that it works, that it should work, as opposed to just continuing to teach and just hope that somebody's behind you. And so I'm not as concerned about the change from a curriculum and instruction perspective. I'm not as concerned about the changes at the state level as you might think, because we've tried to stay the course. As I said before, we're doing what we do. We know we need to be assessing for the reasons that I said. We've got those in place, and we're considering more all the time. Not more for more's sake, but more that's appropriate to triangulate. So we see, is that just an outlier, or is how Cinda is doing in math, is that sort of supported by how she's doing on this assessment and that assessment? And look here, so now we've got 3 assessments, and we can kind of see this is really where she's at. And so that's what we're really doing a lot. The concern I have, I think, is if folks, whether it's the AIR system or SMART, put undue influence on the results of that, because it's just a data point. I think we've gotten more sophisticated to know that results on any one data point are just a result. So I'm not as concerned, actually, because we actually have good measures, and we have a good data warehouse system or learning management system that allows us to run reports off of them. And we're getting much more sophisticated about doing that, and teacher talks and teacher teams and data teams have been established, and they sit and they have data facilitators and data managers, and they meet and PLTs regularly to review and again to benchmark, and then instruction is informed. So teachers would sit around, they'd talk about an individual student's results on multiple assessments, and they'd say, this isn't kicking, this isn't clicking, what else do we do? And then they'll involve the professionals who need to be involved to figure out what that would be. Or conversely, wow, blowing the doors off, I guess, point made, now how do we extend? Those happen all the time, and we're getting better and better at that.
Okay, Cinda.
Thank you for saying that, because I think that's really important in not just how these assessments support, let's say, the state's need for data, but how we support our individual students in their need to learn. And I think when you explain that, I think that it makes perfect sense. Someone could have one bad test day, but when you start to see the pattern, then we know how we can best support them individually. And I think that's a really key thing that we're doing here.
Excellent. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for the data. And we're on to number 6, which was added based on current events, which is the update on the remediation of bat residue at James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School with Matt. I believe there's visual aids that will be included.
Yes, we do.
And he promised me no pictures of bats because they creep me out.
I promise you. Is this on? Let's try this one here. Is that
That
better?
one looks better.
That's better. Okay.
That one's having a good week.
Look at the service you get here at the town hall, huh?
Wow, top notch. Isn't it?
Awesome.
Tell my boss.
Will do. Okay, so it all started a few weeks ago when Tom Tussaud came into my office. Tom Tussaud is our facilities director, as you all know, and said to me, Matt, I need you to come with me and we need to go into a classroom. I need you to smell something. So I went to the upper elementary school. We went to room 110, and we went into that room. At that point in time, we had picked up the principal, Marcia McGill. Bill Morris was tagging along at that point in time. And we walked into the room, and we could smell something as you immediately walked into the room. We stood there for around 10-15 minutes, offering up what we thought our suggestion would be. To me, it smelled like a dead mouse. To other people, it smelled like something else. So our first night there, we had the evening custodial crew drag everything out of the room, look for anything that was in a corner like a dead mouse or something like that, and do a thorough cleaning. Next morning, the smell is still there. And that evening, Mike Dumay, our assistant facilities director, went into the room, isolated the smell to the window jamb, tried to take the window jamb out, and found out that we needed to call Marvell Glass to do it. So we called Marvell Glass, who came over the next day, took the window jamb and the window out of that classroom. We also had Honeywell come by to take the unit ventilator out of that classroom so we could see what was going on in there. And we at that point in time found some bat residue down underneath the window, down at the bottom where the foundation is. At that point in time, we cleaned up what we could. We looked in there, we found some more. Because between the exterior block of the wall, there's some insulation, there's some metal tie-downs, and then there's the exterior brickwork. So there is like an air space in there with insulation. So if you have a little opening up top and a bat can get in there, the bat can put their droppings down in that little cavity. As you recall, when we did the Honeywell project 11 years ago, I think now, they sealed the building envelopes, everything like that. This was part of that process. So this was done probably 10, 11 years ago. During that time, a little crack could have formed. It just takes a little space. I was talking to the gentleman from Critter Control, and he held up a Sharpie, one of those yellow Sharpies. It's just a hole that small, and they can all come in. And you never really know about it until either you see them or you smell them. So after we made the determination of what it was, because there was some exploratory, at first we thought it was perhaps mold. We pulled up all the ceiling tiles, went through all the classrooms, couldn't find any mold or anything like that. But once Mike isolated it to that one particular area and we found out what we were looking at, We weren't quite sure what we were looking at first. So that's when we called in Critter Control, and they confirmed that it was what it was. We talked with the principal, who has been very, very gracious and very accommodating, as is the staff, as are the kids in the building. They've been terrific during this transition time. And we've removed students and staff from 8 classrooms. Room 110, 11, 112, 113. On the second floor, 210, 211, 212, 213, and Bunny's music room, which is now taking place in the all-purpose room. That's been removed. She's been removed, and the kids have been removed from that area. They're utilizing the different science rooms in the classrooms for instructional time, and everything's been moved in that direction. The maintenance department, in conjunction with Critter Control, they've been on the job since we first called them, and we've also hired a mason who's working under the contract of Critter Control right now. The two of them are kind of working in concert right now. We also called in a company that we've been dealing with for 30 years, RPF Environmental Engineering. I think you probably had Dennis Francoeur or Roger Francoeur in front of you at one point in time to talk about PFOAs and PFOA testing. They've been doing all of that for us along the way. And they did some testing after this work started. And there's 2 types of bat spores. And I'm sure there's some sort of science majors amongst the board, so I'm going to brutalize these names, but Cryptococcus neoforums and Histoplasma. I'm not going to bother with the rest of it. The Histoplasma is the bad stuff. That's what you don't want. We did have one room, room 110, test positive for the Cryptococcus neoformans. That was it. We tested, this was last week, we tested room 210, we tested 115, we did some controlled samples outside. Everything else was clear except for that one room, which is the source of the odor in the first place, which kind of makes sense. It was told to us by RPF that the sample that was in the room 110 had a red tinge to it. And that could have been from the people working under this canopy, this tent, because they're cutting bricks, they're sawing walls, and some of that could have gotten into that room. And as they're disposing of it, some of it could have gotten into that room. I'm not saying that's the reason why it had a reading. I'm just saying that's the popular working theory right now. So we've been in contact with the town health inspector. I've spoken or sent an email. I didn't spoke to, but I sent an email to Chief Courier, so he's aware. I've been in contact with Marjorie Schoonemaker from the Department of Education, who's in charge of school approval. I've talked with her this morning, and we will continue to do this until it's gone. This is the tent that is created. This was at 7 o'clock this morning. There's a little hose coming out there that usually attaches to a big piece of apparatus that's called an air scrubber. So any sort of dust or debris that they take out of there will go through the air scrubber before it's released into the environment. It takes out all the hazardous spores and whatever. And let me see if this is my page 1. This is my page 2. Okay. This is the south side of the building. What I was showing you before was the easterly part of the building where the smell originated. This is the southern portion of the building. When it gets cold, bats like heat. And a southern portion of a cement masonry wall has some thermal mass to it, so it retains heat in the evening. So what we are doing is we brought more staging in this morning, and you can see where my cursor is. We're going to take down probably the first 6 or 7 rows of brick in this section. This is the end of the building right now. This is all sealed off. No one can get out of that exit. Everything is sealed off. Stairwells are sealed off. Everything is sealed off. With poly, with tape. The boys are wearing Tyvek suits, everything like that. The company, not our own maintenance facility, people are doing this. So we're going to take off the first 4 to 5 courses of brick along here to the window and take a peek down to see what we can see. Because, like I said, there's a gap. There's insulation, there's a little gap, and there's these metal tie-downs, which you'll see later on, that hold the brick and that keeps it from going back and forth. But there is an airspace in there for insulation purposes. And they're going to take a look down there and see if they see anything. And if they see any bat droppings in that section, what they're going to do is they're going to go down to the bottom and they're going to cut around 4 to 5 courses of bricks off of the bottom piece to see if they see anything in that area. If they see anything in that area, one would assume that it went from the top to the bottom. If that's the case, then this entire brick wall that you're looking at is coming off. So that will be determined sometime this week. So after, if that's not the case, then it's not going to be coming off. But if they see some up top and they don't see any in the bottom, they're going to keep taking the brick away from the top until everything is clear. Because on the inside you have these grout joints. So when you take a brick, you put it on top of the other brick. It has a nice layer of mortar. The outside is nice and smooth, but the inside could kind of bleed into the space a little bit, creating a shelf. And so the bat feces could hit that shelf, stay there, and not fall all the way down. So we want to get to a point where we know that there's nothing left in that wall or the other wall going across the way. We're also having RPF doing testing. They're bringing the media over probably tomorrow. Hopefully we should have the results by the end of the week. They're testing, I believe, 15 different areas right now. All the classrooms, hallways, stairwells, outside control areas. Because, you know, some of these spores, they just occur naturally in the environment. And the spore that I talked to you about, the Cryptococcus N, is harmful to those with a compromised immune system. So if you have HIV, if you're a cancer patient, if you're something along those lines, long-term exposure could be harmful to you. And so right now, you know, there was a reading. It's either a pass or a fail. These aren't like PFOAs. PFOAs have ranges. This doesn't, state of New Hampshire doesn't have a range for whether or not what is considered acceptable or what is considered not acceptable. So we want to make sure the test comes back 0, there's nothing in there, before we let anyone back in there. Yeah, this is the other side of the tent that I got my coat a little bit dusty, and Mr. Thompson was kind enough to dust it off a little bit for me. But this is inside the tent. You can see the cement block. There used to be insulation there, and there used to be exterior brick there. So this has all been removed. This has been washed. This has been sanitized. This will be painted, and then this section will be put back together. and then we'll move on. But we're not going to do anything as far as painting, more insulation, brickwork, until everything is complete. A final test is done of the whole area, and then we'll put the house back together.
Cindy,
Yes.
you have a question on that?
Yeah, can you confirm that we have insurance coverage for this?
This is not covered by insurance, no. It's an exclusion in the policy.
Stand by.
Yeah. So we made the, of course I'm going to make a phone call, right? And I made the phone call. I sent an email. I sent pictures. I did whatever, and it's not covered as part of the policy. It's an unforeseen circumstance. And you kind of ask yourself, well, how did this happen? Well, the smallest crack. Bats are a part of where we live right now. They eat probably 10,000 insects in an evening. They're an important part of our ecosystem, and they find spots to go so they can propagate and go out and do what bats do. And this is an unfortunate incident that they got into the school. It can be the smallest of crack. We were not aware of it. We didn't see bats flying about. We did, during the course of deconstructing this wall, find 2 bats that were hibernating. In talking with the critter control, they've been removed and they've been relocated. You don't kill them. You can't kill these bats. You just can't do it. Some people would say, let's fumigate the entire building and kill all the bats. Well, now you've got an issue. You've got dead bats in your building and you don't know where they are. Plus, you can't do that. It's just against the EPA regulations. You can't do that. So we think, and I'm being totally honest with you, we think there was a colony in there for some time. Could be a year, could be 2 years, that were in that area creating this bat dung that just collected in the wall. And it didn't start to smell until it reached critical mass, so to speak. Maybe it got wet, and maybe something whatever. That's what we found. We found some wet feces there. And for a year or so, there were no smells. There was nothing there. I remember somebody was saying, yeah, I was there for parent night. We were in the room. Everything was fine. And it just turned in a day or two or over a weekend. So we are going to continue to chase this problem. We're going to continue to monitor the situation, and like I said, there'll be 14 samples are going to be tested this week in various areas, and we're hoping to get a 0 reading in room 110, but there aren't going to be any students going back in there until everything is put back together, everything is safe. Everything is safe for staff and students. They're obviously our first priority, and that the project is complete. We're also going to put in, bats they're creatures of habit, having some personal experience with a few bats in my 1939 house. Once they find a way in, they remember that way in. They can find it no matter what you do to it. So after this is done, we're going to seal up everything. But if there are any bats remaining in this building, which there could be, what you do is you put let's say a PVC tube with a one-way valve in it. So what will happen is the bat, when it wants to go out at night, will go out at night, do its bat thing, and then it'll try to come back in the same hole, but the door won't allow it. It's a one-way out. So once he's out, he's out. And if we sealed the rest of the building, he's out for good. They'll go relocate someplace else, perhaps on Lawrence Road. But I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. I know how you are about that.
Thank you.
I just want to let everybody know that, please have confidence in us that we are doing the utmost best job that we can, that we have taken this very seriously, and we are going to see this through to the end in order to give you the peace of mind that you need so you can put your kids back in that room and teachers can teach back in those areas. So, and that won't be done until the job is done. And we're thinking right now, as far as the timeline, I'm thinking by January. This isn't going to be another 2 weeks. I think it's going to be probably the entire month of December, and we may have to go into January to get this done. So, having said that, and having showed you some pictures with no bat feces in there, because I couldn't find any. When I looked in the pockets, there was none there. It's all been cleared out. So, it was, part of it was in the unit ventilators. That was one of the things. We had Honeywell come by. We took the unit ventilators out. We thought maybe there was something dead in the unit ventilators. They took them all out. So we went through multiple things to try and ascertain what the heck it was. And this was the last thing we expected and the last spot we expected. We're just lucky Mike Dumay kind of zeroed in on the location, literally. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them at this time.
I saw Mike. I see Andy. And Cinda's back.
First, I'd like to just thank the administration for the communication that they've done to the parents, and obviously tonight providing this additional information. It's obvious that you're being thorough, considering a wall has been taken apart. I'm wondering if there's a way to just maybe look at the other schools and make sure that there's no. I know that Honeywell came through years ago. I'm not sure how long ago that was, but is there any?
10, 11.
Yeah. So it's been
a while. It's been a while.
So I'm not sure if there's a way to kind of just look at the schools and also maybe even just use some night vision technology or something like that to actually just put around the schools to actually see if there's activity at night.
Yeah, we'll have that conversation with Critter Control. I was asking Tom because I saw on the roof the flashing is a little bit away from the roof. So when you have the roof, you have the brick, and then you have the flashing for the roof go over the edge. And it was pulled away. And I said, Tom, is this one of the roofs? This wasn't one of the roofs we've done recently. He says, no, we haven't touched this roof at all. So as part of the benefit of doing the roofs, you're sealing in everything. So we'll probably consult with the Critter Control people to point them in the direction where we haven't done roofing projects and say, you need to look at these particular areas and see if we could seal up everything, because most of the large colonies are gone. They're gone south. They're gone, period. So all we'd be dealing with is a few, but now is the time to seal everything up before they come back.
I think that you guys obviously are doing a great job, and I'm sure that you will continue to do so.
Yeah.
So thank you.
We posted this on our district Facebook page, so there's already been around 300 hits in the last 2 hours looking at these pictures. So we're, encouraged by that to try and get the information out to everybody, show everybody we're being honest, show everybody we're being diligent, and show everybody that we're trying to be as forthcoming with information as possible.
Marge?
I was just going to say, in addition to what Matt is saying about the roofs, you recall that Jim Lucy and Wally Howe were here before you, I think it was a couple of months ago. And since that time, Jim has begun with Honeywell agents to do an analysis of the air in all the schools, because do you remember how you said you wanted baseline data? And then off baseline data will come where do we need to start with ventilation first, because obviously can't we do everything at once, so it's like what are the critical areas. So I think what we could do tomorrow, I just had a conversation with him today, is to talk in terms of the situation we face. I didn't get into it today. I was just hearing that he had started his work, but we could tell him that, and that will provide another focus, so it'll be concurrent.
Okay. Mike, are you all set? Okay, so Andy and then Cinda.
So, yeah, thanks. This has been, having had critter issues, I think all of us in our houses at one point or another have had unwanted guests that you've had to deal with.
My mother-in-law lives in New York.
Anyway, so you know, and I appreciate the fact that when you find it, then you have to remediate it, and many times it's a whole lot more than you thought it was going to be when you started. You know, Mike talked about checking the other buildings and things like that to see if there's any activity that's there. My assumption is, based on what you said, that even with the best intentions and upkeep and everything, sometimes it's just the bad luck of an animal or a bat or something like that deciding to take advantage of some small opening that occurred naturally or might have always been there, to just take over. I mean, it's not a bad design of any particular building type we're doing or anything like that. It's just part of.
It's the way things. It's a naturally occurring process that bats are going to be seeking shelter, and they will seek it in any building they can. Unfortunately, schools having the thermal mass, you know, they go on the east side, they get a little bit cooler. When they get too cool, they'll move to the south side. You know, it's just like, you know, if you have pets or anything like that, they'll follow the sun wherever it goes. Well, it's the same thing with bats. So it wasn't a lack of being responsible and looking out for these things. It's just that, you know, if we had a sighting or two, we could have done something, but we didn't have any sightings or anything like that.
Right.
And we didn't notice it until the smell. So it's not that the custodial staff should have been up on the roofs or in the crevices looking every single day to see if there was something. This could be a very tiny hole that could have been made by a little chipmunk or something like that who just got in there, created the hole, and then the bats found it and they just went in.
Right. And my point in all this is
Yes.
is that there are hundreds and hundreds of school buildings like this in the state of New Hampshire, that any one of them could be subject to this and may be in the middle of it and just the smell's not out there yet, as
Correct.
you have evidence here. So I guess from a Merrimack perspective, we've had this happen and it's raised our awareness, so we're probably going to be more proactive about looking at the rest of our buildings. But this could be a learning experience for the state. This is something that could happen and you've got to be aware. So in some ways, while some in town and through social media have said that we're derelicting our responsibility of checking, I contend that, as you said, it's naturally occurring. You know, it has nothing to do with a lack of maintenance, but rather it's part of a due diligence, I guess, that any school district or any municipality needs to do to periodically check these sorts of things. And we're doing it proactively, but it may be a learning experience for other towns and schools in the state, I would say.
We have had bats in our buildings before, and we put those one-way tubes in when a teacher said there is a bat in my classroom, whatever, and we've done investigatory work and whatnot, and we have, you know, remediated them that way. I have never seen anything where we've had a colony living in our building for a year or so creating this type of damage. I've never seen this in 25 years.
Right, and it would be good to sort of, when you get done with all this stuff, to put together sort of a summary or post-mortem of this that you might be able to share with other districts of things to look
Yes.
for and analysis to do and stuff like that to maybe help them more quickly get to a resolution than
Yeah,
it took us.
I absolutely agree. This is not something that I have seen very often, and I've worked in other districts that had exceedingly old buildings. And this is like the 97 edition portion. And so, you know, perhaps this is, you know, something after we're done, we're going to look at the other schools and be proactive. Because this is a good time to do it because they're gone for the summertime. The bats.
Wintertime.
Wintertime, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if you want,
I'd like to be gone for them, yeah. Anyway,
in the spirit of publish or perish on this study, I think Naomi has some guidelines she can help you with. So,
You have guidelines for me?
very much.
Okay. I'll take any help I can get on this one.
Cinda?
I was just going to say the same thing, which was now we would be prudent to look at our other buildings in a reasonable way. not only is it a good time because it just happened, but you also have all the right people engaged. And
Yes.
have, they're all kind of coordinated. So it certainly makes sense. And I mean, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but
Yeah, between the critter control people, RPF, and the masonry company, I wish I could mention their name because I'd give them a plug. They have been working tremendously as a team together. I've never seen a group of 3 people who were more dedicated to getting things done right. So,
right. Well, keep us posted.
yeah, we'll do.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
So I think, just obviously you're going to keep us posted, you're going to keep the community posted and parents posted, and that's exactly what we want you to do. The one thing I would say is, when it comes to maintenance, I don't think anyone takes it more seriously than this district does. Our buildings are pristine, considering the age of what we manage and considering the age of the schools that we visit that are 5-10 years old. Toe to toe, we are exceptional. So this is an unfortunate occurrence, but when you look at our proactivity as a district, just take a look at. I think we already had scheduled lead testing before a study on lead testing came out within weeks of us already doing it. So we're always, I think, trying to stay on top of things and one step ahead of things, and have proven so in our actions in prior years. This is unfortunate. I call it an exception, not a rule. Where the bat got ahead of us versus us ahead of the bat. So I think that, as I said, something we can learn from and probably have a best practice by the end of it for others to follow. So
More than likely, yes.
all the confidence here that the job's getting done, and the communication that you've been doing is exactly what we as a board have been looking for, so we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And now for item number 7, which is the overview of the proposed 2018-19 school district budget. I passed out the books, so Matt's not in trouble for that. It was me. He was moving his car to an appropriate spot, but I didn't peek, and I hope no one else did besides Andy either. So I will give it over to Marge because I know Andy peeked, and we'll go through the highlights and talk about the future of our planning.
Thank you. So I'm going to start out on a note of appreciation. This is the 17th budget that's been put together by my team, and I just have to commend the principals, assistant principals, directors, and most especially Matt, Mark, and Linda for just helping put this together when you think of the number of people, and 2 administrative assistants, Leah Bruce and Sandy Swanson in our office, who take this work very seriously. And I also want to say that a difference, if I was thinking about this budget and a budget put together 10 years ago, the thing that we do very differently is we begin to converse with the board early on about all the things that are important. So we have discussions, if you think about it, in the summer, and all those conversations really, really help to formulate what gets put in the budget. And tools such as the capital improvement plan, the logic model, all of these, I just commend our budget process to any other district, and we're blessed to have a budget committee to boot. Not everybody has an elected budget committee. So let me talk first of all about those things that need to be accomplished between now and when you approve the budget and give it to the budget committee. Obviously, you're engaged in collective bargaining with the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association, and that's a major piece because hopefully there will be a warrant that will have something to do with the collective bargaining agreement. I want to talk about possible warrant articles, and the first one I'm going to highlight is full-day kindergarten. You remember before I came to you, before we actually put all the puzzle pieces together, and I said, would you allow me to put full-day kindergarten into the budget, embed it into the budget? And you gave me the go-ahead to do that. Well, it's interesting because everything takes on a context and timing. And so it was balancing some parent requests, some desire of kindergarten teachers, the desire of elementary principals, the desire of us, who very much want full-day kindergarten because we think it would be beneficial to our 5-year-olds, up against what can the taxpayer bear that, having just received what the tax rate was going to be, in addition to saying, how much will it cost to do this? Because we had done all the planning around it, but we really hadn't honed in on a cost. We are estimating that it would be $775,000 because of the hiring of additional staff. So we have additional teachers, additional kindergarten instructional assistants, and equipping of the classrooms that haven't been equipped. So that's what we think it would cost. And that's when we determined as a team that this needs to stand on its own merit. This needs to be put out as a warrant because it has recurring costs. When you hire staff, right, that's going to be a cost that comes around year to year. And if, in fact, it's important for our children in this community, the community should take a stand. And if we put it in the budget, I really feared that people would say, you haven't been transparent, even though I feel we've been vetting this topic for a period of time. And so we determined that we want to talk more about it. We have parents who are willing to do all kinds of support, but we want to put it out there for conversation to see if you think it should be a warrant this year or perhaps an outlying year. That's why it was pulled. Trust me, it is still a #1 priority. Another consideration for you is the consolidation of the central office, the superintendent's office, and the student services office together into an administrative office. Over the next 6-week period, while the budget is being put together by you, you will have an opportunity to purchase some property for that to occur. Now, what we know is that nothing like that will occur without the vote of the taxpayers. However, in order for it to occur, it would need to be a warrant. So we will be further discussing that over the period of time, but that also was a major consideration. You will be asked to look at paving the lower lot and circle in front of Thornton's Ferry School. We have estimated that cost to be to over $200,000, and that is something we have had on the capital improvement plan for a period of time. You will note that we had talked about replacing bleachers in the Smith Gym. That had surfaced by the Planning and Building Committee. It had only been mentioned once. We had never heard it from anyone else. And I think it was we ourselves, that is Matt and I, who came to you and said, would you move these bleachers from this year to this year because we think we want to do it. Well, what you'll find embedded in the budget is a water filtration system. And just like a family, we had to make a decision. So we, the administration, looked at the water filtration system up against the Smith Gym bleachers, and we said, you know what? Water filtration is more important to us. We're putting that in. And we would ask you to take a look at putting the Smith bleachers either into a warrant or putting it back on the CEP for the next year. But we just, again, we're making decisions. Other considerations. Given the bat situation, which Cinda raised up about insurance or whatever, this couldn't have happened at a more interesting time because, and I reference it in the writing, not only do I want it there historically, but I want to say that this is exactly what you're up against and why you need a surplus account, a capital reserve fund that's got surplus in it for unanticipated and emergency needs. And so we are asking you to take a look at that. Currently, we have $154,000 in that fund. You, the voters, and you approved $75,000, so we'll have a total of $229,000. But the fact of the matter is, this is going to be an expensive remediation. You can hear we've got an air quality group, we've got a mason, we've got critter control, and the fact is they're going to be working with us over a month. So we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we are going to come back to you and ask to draw from that fund. So what we would say to you is we'll know that in the next 6 weeks, and we would like to replenish the fund with what we take out. So when you asked, I was just waiting for the opportunity to say we think that makes sense. But look at how it just happened, and it just proves the point. The other thing that this very board asked, it might have been Andy, to talk about retention of surplus funds at the end of the year to level out the tax rate in a given year. And we talked about it a while ago, and I took down a note because it was, could we come back to that as we deliberate and so on? So whether you deliberate it now or not, it's a placeholder here. I call that another consideration. So all of those topics are topics that need to be discussed in some way or other a bit further before you decide, or to help you decide about warrants. Now, I want to go from there into maintenance, because maintenance tends to carry a lot of items that go back and forth between the CIP and warrant possibilities and so on. And so in the maintenance budget itself, you have two of your CIP items. One is the roof replacement at Reeds Ferry School for $507,300. And that you've talked quite a bit about, and you will be talking about it further on December 18th. The second CIP item is replacing a section of the outside bleachers at Merrimack High School. Those we put in the budget because those are listing, and those absolutely need to be taken care of. So we felt those should go in the budget. Again, Matt will have his pictures. We'll talk about that in December. Third is the water filtration system that I alluded to. Matt and Tom have done more investigation. We will talk further to you about that on December 18th. It is to remove PFOAs from all consumable water in the 6 schools. It's estimated to cost $128,590. Now, what I say in the text is that's a placeholder. We thought that was at a minimum. So you might decide this is not the reverse osmosis. That was, I think, a second system. You might decide, no, we want to do more than that. You might decide you want to pull it out of the operating budget and put it in a warrant. But we felt that you have been talking about this topic probably more than any other topic. And I referenced the fact that not only did you have people here to give you guidance about it and do testing, but you also had the MVD here because they're our water supplier, and you also had a joint meeting with town council. So look at the deliberation that's gone on. That's what prompted us to put this in the budget. Also, on a smaller scale, but still terribly important, exterior and interior cameras at the middle school and the high school. If you look on the cut page on the inside cover of your book, you're going to see that there are numbers of cameras listed in numbers of locations. But once again, just like a family, this was having a major review of our entire district. So if we wanted to cover all bases, what would it cost? And then was decision time. So this is how we decided. We said, what are the areas that tend to give us the most difficulty when either dealing with disciplinary investigations and or any other kind of issue? In the past year, what has caused us most difficulty? And the areas that are named for the middle and the high school are those. The other would be nice to do. Remember how it's need and want? It would be nice to do all those other areas, but we didn't feel that we could spend more than $48,000 given everything else that we need to do. So they all appear on the cut list. We have a formal rendering about the study that was done, and we would hope to implement all the others at some point in time. In addition, there are some projects that we have just pushed to the side because of other things that needed to be tended to, and now we want to get to them. For one, at the upper elementary school, we would like you at some point to go into the art room and see the cabinets that are there. They are very old, they are falling apart, and they need to be replaced. That particular effort would be approximately $46,000. Likewise, at James Mastercola Elementary School, we have cafeteria tables that are 29 years old that are in the wall. You know how they are. We have meetings there. This would be the last of the 3 elementary schools to get replacement tables. Replacement tables are $48,500. And lastly, at James Mastercola Elementary School, in each one of the 22 classrooms, there is a combination cabinet sink base. I think you can see them. You've been in that building before. 22 classrooms. We're proposing to replace 11 of the 22 sinks and bases. So again, do you see how you can see we're entering into a project but not doing all of it? Because we think 2 years makes better sense. Again, just trying to parse out all the projects. But those 4 projects themselves are like $250,000, $250,000. They need to be done. That's why I say you'll see CIP items up against smaller projects that need to just be tended to. Let me get into enrollments. First of all, we worked with NESDEC on enrollments. You're going to see a more comprehensive report by Don Kennedy, who is the demographic specialist. He really took an interest in Merrimack this time. We've dealt with him for a number of years because I was talking to him about doing full-day kindergarten. So I want to just say, first of all, if you looked at what's the population for kindergarten if we do half-day, we're projecting 185 students. If we were to do full-day kindergarten, it would be 240. It's about a 55 student differential. And he's done that by looking at live births and just taking a lot of things into consideration. So then when you look at just our overall population, we're going to lose 62 students. The preschool, we're going to gain 2. The high school, we're going to lose 3. So those 2 ends, if you will, of the continuum stay pretty much the same. We're going to lose 40 at the elementary level, but it goes kind of across the board, so it doesn't necessarily hit one particular level. We're going to gain 19 at the upper elementary level, and we're going to lose 40 at the middle school. So the overall rendering is minus 62. So that causes us to do a reduction in force. The board has always, I think, been pleased with the way we conduct our business. We haven't done a large number of people over time. We do a small number to meet the need at the time. So in this particular case, we're recommending that we eliminate the equivalent of 1.5 teaching positions at the elementary level. And if you look at the chart, you'll see where we do the comparative of Mastrocola to Reeds Ferry to Thorntons Ferry. We're always trying to build in equity across the board to make sure that the student to teacher ratio is appropriate across. And so if we were to take out minus 0.5 kindergarten teacher across the board, that equates to the 1.5 teaching positions. The other thing we do in Merrimack, because we have 3 elementary schools that are configured the same, preschool to grade 4, we were able to transfer. So if we have a need for 1 teacher at Mastrocola and we're having to remove a teacher from Reeds Ferry, we can just do a transfer from Reeds Ferry to Mastrocola. So we've got some of that going on. But as far as a reduction in force, it would be minus 1.5 teaching positions at the elementary level. At the middle school level, do you remember we've had a team that's gone back and forth from 7th grade to 8th grade? We call it kind of our half-time team, and we've had 2 teachers in English language arts and a math teacher who have done coordination as well as teaching. And so now comes the time. It was a team concept that was to go 5 years. We actually took it 7, believe it or not. But now we come to a point in time where we're minus 40 students. So we need to pull this team apart. This is what we're recommending. We're recommending the elimination of 1 science teaching position and 1 social studies position. But what we'd ask you to do is to take the 0.5 ELA, English Language Arts Coordinator, and Math Coordinator, and make those full-time coordinators. Then what you have is a seamless stretch of English Language Arts coordination all the way from the elementary to the upper elementary to the middle, and at the high school, the English department head. So, yes.
I think there may be a typo that I don't want to forget to mention. I'm looking at, as you talk at page 14, it looks to me like at the middle school it's saying social studies and the special ed coordinator are the 2 lines that have -1 on them.
It should be science. It should be science. So thank you for saying, because you know what we can do? We can replace the page, and we can make sure that the budget committee members get the right page, and then you get the follow-up. So could you just tell me the page number, Naomi, please?
14.
Page 14. Would you just take that down for me? Thank you. Yes, thank you. I appreciate you being my editorial board as we go. This is good. Thank you. So anyway, back to the team. So do you see we want to do the EL coordinator position and the math coordinator position? Likewise, math. Think about this. We're just doing a new math implementation, right? And we have students who need some care and keeping who are not in Title I or special ed. So it allowed this person to do some small student work. And also for observations and so on, it would just be terribly meaningful. Then again, we pull from math facilitators to a math coordinator to a math department head at the high school. So we're asking you to consider that. Now, no changes at Merrimack High School. It stays the same. We are recommending district-wide 1 computer technician. The current ratio we have in district, and you've talked about this before, is 1 technician to 1,000 devices. We just take a pause there because that just takes our breath away, I think. And we have more than doubled the number of computers, laptops, tablets in the last 7 years. And yet our personnel has worked very, very hard. But there comes a point where it's just not even efficient. And so Director Nancy Rose, when she comes before you, will talk more about this, but clearly its time has come and the leadership team understands its merit. You do have 2 completed contracts in place. The MTA, the Merrimack Teachers Association, is in the 3rd year of a 3-year agreement. So Matt has reflected that in the budget. You also have an agreement with the administrators, a 1st year of a 3-year agreement that has been reflected in the budget as well.
I just have a point of clarification on that. So contracts go in front of the taxpayers to be voted on, correct?
Contracts, the advise and confer
Yeah,
is
that-
normally placed in the budget.
That's not my question.
I'm sorry.
My question is, it gets approved by the taxpayers as the next step?
It will be. Mm-hmm.
So that's my question is if it's not actually confirmed by the taxpayer, why is it actually in the budget? Or not actually added as an item after it's confirmed by the taxpayer?
I'm thinking that all of this is a recommendation, and so it all needs to be affirmed
But I guess
by
my-
the voters. So it would be raised at the budget committee level, and it will also be raised as we go through the process. So we've just done that
Yeah,
all of the years.
she's stating the things that's for consideration. One of the things you have to consider is the outcome of the negotiations with the support staff.
So when it's going
That's
in front of the...
not in the budget. That's going to be separate, and that'll be a warrant article.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So for employee benefits, I want to raise up health coverage. Although it is a wonderful rate, people still want to know about health coverage. So you remember the guaranteed maximum rate is 3.5%, which actually translates into about $76,000 more than was budgeted last year, which is just one of the best rates we've had in a very long time, and it just needs to be said. One of the areas that's up is New Hampshire retirement for professional staff. The rate has stayed the same, 17.36%. However, when you put that up against the 3rd year of 3 years for professional staff salaries, obviously the amount is going to be larger. So we just need to capitalize on that because it's a higher rate. For classroom instructional focus, I want to definitely pronounce that probably the most important thing to us is the implementation of math at the high school level. You heard Mark reference the 8th grade text, but also 9 through 12. That is a major effort, and the high school is working with Mark as I speak right now. Also, if you look in the text section, you'll see that we're asking to purchase a new set of accounting texts, which averages, I think it comes out to about $22,000. And it's really important because accounting is a dual enrollment course with Southern New Hampshire University. So not only is it a need, but it also is curriculum approved by SNU because our kids are able to get double coverage there. You're going to find furniture replacement plans highlighted. All of the principals are requesting furniture, and you will see that. They don't refer anymore to the 3rd of 5 years or 4 or 5 years, because once we got into deferment, that kind of got off track. So they just call it a multi-year plan. But they would be able to tell you how many more years before they'll be finished with asking for desks and chairs. Also, you're going to see in Nancy Rose's section a request for more mobile laptops. This is the most efficient way to go, to have carts that are able to move laptops around. You saw Mark reference the fact that even assessments now are being done on these devices, and we are really promoting a kindergarten through 12th grade thrust for robotics and programming. So you'll see STEM referenced to in the text as well. I've given you, I think, a lightly once over of what we consider to be the major parts of the budget. Obviously, as you begin to delve deeper into it, I think you'll see other things certainly that are equally as important. So now we come to the end, the actual, oh, pardon me, no, I left off something. I'm just realizing it. I wanted to tell you about transportation as well. Transportation, our contract with Student Transportation of America is up 3.5%. That's a part of our ongoing contract, but I wanted to highlight that. And also for student services, we have a new vendor for John Fabrizio. It's Caring Hands, and so that initial transportation contract also is up 5%. You'll see in the budget that we are asking for the purchase of a second van. You remember we have 2 vans relegated to student services, and that's to transport students to their job sites and to other programming that's specified in their IEPs. Likewise, we want to point out that related services costs, this is for like speech, audiology, occupational therapy, neurologists, behavioral analysts, those related services, the cost is more expensive, and also we're having a change in vendor. And so you'll see that reflected in John Fabrizio's budget. So when you take a look at all of these items and we come down to the bottom line, let me give you the amount. I'm sure you're seeing that. The 2018-2019 proposed administrative budget is $74,833,856. You compare that against the 2017-2018 approved operating budget, which this year is $74,254,231. The difference between the two is $579,625. The proposed administrative budget is 0.78%, or less than 1%, more than the 2017-2018 approved operating budget. The 2018-2019 default budget, which is required by statute, RSA 40:13, is $75,153,005. The proposed administrative budget is $319,149 less than the default budget. So I've given you a lot to think about, for sure, a lot of discussions to come, especially on the items I highlighted in the beginning, but hopefully this budget will have merit in your eyes when you take a further look at it.
A moment of pause. I know that we have a lot to discuss, and we're probably not going to vet this tonight because that would be we'd probably be here till dawn. But I think as we're preparing this budget and we have it in our hands, and we will go into our next agenda item fairly fluidly, I think this shows you, based on the forethought and everything else, how important it is for us to prepare, and as we're reviewing this, prepare questions for administration, that so they can go back and use their research to be able to thoroughly help us understand how they got to these numbers and basically the impacts that these expenditures have on the outcome of the education of our district. So with that, just kind of laying it out there for the season, as we are preparing, knowing that we are going to have usually a very intense budget cycle, knowing we have it now, definitely worthy of some initial study. And but as you are having questions, prepare them, send them to Marge, copy me, and we'll make sure that we're getting them the appropriate and respectful time to be able to answer us thoroughly and accurately. So on that note, we're on to item number 8, which is school board budget hearing dates. So Marge, I'll let you continue.
Surely. We've put this together. Again, it's some of it is arbitrary and capricious. We just need to make sure that it's good for you. So you can see at your next board meeting on December 18th, we're in this very room, and you'll see that food service and maintenance are the highlights. Playing off of what Shannon said to you, I would like you, if you could, to look at those 2 areas. If you see something that you want to make sure is covered more thoroughly, if you could just let me know that so that Tom and Dave can come to you prepared. If you look at the next meeting, pardon me?
Can you give us due dates that we can put for those questions to be forwarded?
Yes, so I would think if you had them, let me see, what is next week, the 11th? Could you have them to me by the 13th? Trying to give you a weekend. So then the following meeting you'll see is on Tuesday, January 2nd. And notice where we're going to be that night. I've highlighted in yellow. We're going to be in the memorial room, which is the room over by the town manager's office, because that is the night when this room is engaged. And you'll see the areas that will highlight that particular night. JMU's, Technology, Library, Media, and Special Services. The next date is, I'm sorry.
Again, as we're going through it, knowing we have a holiday week and everything else, when do you need those questions provided so that we can get you enough time for appropriate answers?
Yeah, that would be great if you could have it the week of December 18th. If you could even have it on Monday or Tuesday, 18th or 19th, because these folks are going to take that last week. They're encouraged to take that last week as part of their annual leave. So it would be hard to come back on Tuesday and have everything ready for you, if that's possible.
Okay, so would 12/18, 12/19 at the latest? Still checking on that night.
December 19th. Okay, thank you. So now, is January 4th, Thursday, appropriate for you? Did you all agree to that? I just couldn't remember. Do we say that the Thursday would be fine to do?
The only conflict that I saw is that's safeguard night. Memory safeguard means we just wouldn't
The
have.
chair's going to be busy that night.
Yeah, and the chair could change it too. couldn't
Yeah,
it?
so
So we may need to
the chair.
reposition that meeting.
Yeah, the chair's going to take care of it.
No
so-
pressure, Mark. but-
Yeah. All right. So again, we'll be in that room. Now, there again, is it possible to, I just think if we make it January 2nd, then, to get questions for these, maybe,
Could we try to do by the 18th, 19th with ancillary
Yeah,
questions?
if you can,
on
that
by
would
the
be
2nd,
great.
you know?
That would be great.
I mean, but having a supplemental question by like January 2nd as a follow-up,
Yeah.
just
Because they'll all want to do due diligence,
Yeah.
and give you their best thinking.
And high school has lots of moving parts as well.
It
so.
does, yeah. That's the biggest one, for
Mhm.
sure. And then Tuesday, January 9th, we're back here again. And I would assume, and Shannon and I, now that you have the budget, Shannon and I will talk, because some of those conversations that I ask you to deliberate about, be it kindergarten or the water filtration system or whatever, we can have more discussion about that. So we'll try and thread those into these times. But that would be a day, too, that we could use for, formulating warrants, but also further discussion. So we'll work on that. So if this is set, this is how we'll advise all the people, the participants. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Marge. Andy, did you have a question?
I was trying to get everybody's attention here. So,
I'm coughing in your face. Sorry.
So the final note at the bottom says the goal is the final approval of the budget on either January 9th or at the board meeting on the 16th. Is there a date that you've committed to give the budget to the budget committee?
The budget committee is going to start meeting, I believe. Do you know, Matt, if it's, I think it's the following Tuesday. So Matt's already had one session with the budget committee and so on. Could I just cross-talk and just say, Naomi, do you know anything differently? Because you're our rep on that, right? The board's rep. So I think the 23rd would be the following Tuesday, right? Yeah. So I would say January 23rd is when they're going to have their first meeting.
Right. The only reason I ask is because as we go through, there's a lot to talk about, and the holidays are at a weird time. We may need that meeting on the 16th to talk through some things and then do the vote. So I just want to make sure that we have enough time to do what we need to do before we owe it to them. That's all.
I think probably the warrants are certainly might not be done there. I'm thinking in terms of the budget itself, at least to get started with. There might be some parts that are definite we could begin with, but
Okay.
I think Stan is thinking January 23rd.
And will they be meeting in advance to be able to start? When will they be getting their books?
They're coming in to get their books tomorrow, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, and then can we give them the same deadlines for questions as we have in past years?
We can do that. I think we have talked with the chairman before, Stan, about that, and I think perhaps the budget committee operates a little bit differently. I don't know.
Okay.
Do different years, different
Ways of
procedures,
meeting?
and so I've talked briefly to him about it, and I think he would like the board to go ahead, and then
Do parallel tracks.
we'll play off of what the board does.
Okay.
Perhaps. Was anything said at your meeting about that? No.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. On that note, we're on to housekeeping. So we're on to item number 9, which is the approval of the November 20th, 2017 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve? Made by Andy, seconded by Cinda. Are there any edits to the minutes? Seeing none, we'll put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0. And then we're on to item number 10, which is the acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000. And it says it's me, but I think I'll let
it's
Matt do it.
Mhm.
I'm feeling Matt.
I was picking up the paper anyway. I didn't
Thank
even
you.
notice the name. Bless you. This is a gift to Merrimack High School from the Guild of New Hampshire Woodworkers, 31 Mill Pond Road, Kittery, Maine, 03904, in the amount of $1,514.93. It's to expand lathe turning curriculum specifically in the areas of hollow, form, and spindle turning. Seems like that would be therapeutic. I've always wanted to try that, to be honest with you. The Guild of New Hampshire Woodworkers asked that a press release, or perhaps we could post this on our website, to local news outlets occur showcasing MHS's woodworking students' newly acquired skills. So we can certainly account for that. There is an estimated recurring cost of about $50 per academic year for general maintenance and whatnot. So we thank them for their generosity to our already stellar wood shop program. Wood shop isn't exactly wood craftsman program, I would say it is.
Many award winners out of that program.
Yes.
So, thank you. Cinda?
I'd like to move that we accept their gift with our gratitude. And I do have one question. Well, I need a second first, probably, right? Yeah.
Sure. Seconded by Andy. Go for it.
I just wanted to know who was responsible for that press release, just so we have someone that has ownership of it.
It has to be Phil Carl, I would say.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Excellent. So, if there's a vote, motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to the consent agenda, and that was with Dr. Mark McLaughlin.
So one item tonight under consent is the following educator resignation: Mary Alice Corliss, science teacher at Merrimack High School.
Is there a motion? Andy,
I move we accept the consent agenda as written.
is there a second? Seconded by Cinda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to item number 12, which is other. A, correspondence. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? Mike.
I had a discussion with multiple constituents in regards to the homework policy. All the conversations were very beneficial for both parties to hear and also understand the protocol. Sorry, making sure I say that. And there's some additional feedback that I'll provide to the administration based off those discussions.
Thank you. Is there any other correspondence? Naomi.
I've had what sounds like one similar conversation, which does not need any action, just information sharing and gathering thoughts that I will transfer as well.
Thank you. Seeing no other correspondence, are there comments from the board? Seeing none, we will close item number 12. Number 13, is there any new business to come before the board? Seeing none, we'll close new business. Item 14, committee reports. Are there any committee reports from the board? Okay, Naomi.
As we already talked about, the Budget Committee has begun its meetings and has scheduled its upcoming work. I believe we've also put in place an additional meeting to fill an open position on that committee. So if there's anybody interested in joining the process, there is space for a member from the community.
Excellent. And I have Greater Woods, and I will tell you the update is that on Saturday we will be working in the woods. So I will be, if you need me on Saturday morning, I will be amongst the forest creatures. But we're going to do some trail maintenance and some bridge work and some signage. So item number 15, public comments on agenda items, the same empty room we started with, so I will close public comments. Take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numerals 2, sections A and E.
So moved.
Moved by Mike. Is there a second? Seconded by Cinda. Naomi, how do you vote?
In favor?
Mike.
In favor.
Cinda.
In favor.
Andy.
In favor?
And I vote in favor. The motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you, and good night.